All right, so let me tell you, let me paint you a picture of what freedom actually looks like, and not the surface level version of where you're just dating someone new again, riding the same high, telling yourself that this time is going to be different. I'm talking about real freedom, the kind where you wake up next to someone you've been with for, say, 2 years, and you feel more connected to them than you did in month 2. You know, the kind where you have disagreements, and instead of pulling away, you work through it and you come out closer on the other side. The kind where your partner isn't fascinating every single day, where the relationship isn't exciting every single moment, you know, but you choose them anyway because you've built something that matters more than excitement. And this is what becomes possible when you finally just break free from the serial starter pattern, when you develop the capacity to stay instead of just start, you know, to build instead of just fall, when you appreciate depth instead of just chasing the intensity. And I want to show you what this transformation actually looks like, because imagine if Drake's incredible capacity for emotional expression, all that vulnerability, all that feeling, all that understanding of romance, what if he transformed it from a tool of seduction into a foundation for partnership? If his vulnerability became about staying present through difficulty instead of just creating connection in the beginning, if he discovered that the depth available in year 2 with someone is far more fulfilling than the intensity of month 2 with someone new, this shift wouldn't erase his capacity for romance or passion, but it would transform it into something sustainable. You know, something that could actually build a life instead of just starting relationships that go nowhere. And the same possibility awaits you as well. You know, whether you're recovering from being hurt by a serial starter or recognizing that, you know, the pattern is in yourself. When you break free from that addiction, you know, the newness, the addiction to newness, when you develop the capacity to appreciate what comes after the beginning ends, when you actually learn the value to value consistency over intensity, your entire experience of relationships transforms, because you stop exhausting yourself with endless beginnings. Stop breaking hearts, including your own, you know, because you don't come out unscathed. You stop, you know, wondering why nothing ever lasts, and you start building something real, something deep, something that fulfills you in ways that intensity never could. If you think about what this looks like in your actual life, you know, if you've been hurt by a serial starter or serial starters, you stop attracting them because you start requiring consistency early on. You know, you stop being impressed by the intensity and actually start watching for follow through. You know, you stop investing in people who are capable or only capable of beginnings, and you start to recognize the earliest signs. You know, the person who comes on a bit too strong, too fast, you know, who creates instant or intense connection immediately, who makes big promises in the first few weeks. And instead of being swept up by all of that, you think, hold on, this is nice, yeah, but let's see if they're still here in month 6. And also you stop blaming yourself. When people can't stay, you stop blaming yourself. You stop wondering what you did wrong. You stop trying to be interesting enough to keep someone who's only capable of temporary interest. And you start actually building with people who have the capacity for depth, who value consistency, who can appreciate you in month 12 as much as they did in month 1, not because you're still new, but because they've developed the maturity to value what you've built together. Imagine being with someone for 6 months and feeling more secure, not less, more connected, not less, more excited about the future that you're actually building with this person, not less interested because the newness is worn off. Imagine your partner seeing you at your worst, you know, stressed, tired, not at your most fascinating, and choosing you anyway, not because you're performing for them, but because they value the partnership that they've actually built with you. And imagine conflicts that bring you closer instead of pushing you both apart, because you're with someone who can work through difficulty instead of running from it. And this is what becomes possible when you just stop accepting these serial starter behaviors. You know, when you require consistency, when you value depth over intensity. And even if you recognize the serial starter pattern in yourself, you know, you stop running, you stop starting over every single time the excitement fades. You stop mistaking the end of intensity for the end of compatibility. You know, and you start staying through the boredom, through the moments where your partner isn't fascinated, you know, through the transition from falling to building. And then you discover something you've never experienced before. You discover real intimacy, you know, the kind that only exists when you've stayed long enough to actually build it, the kind that can't exist in beginnings because it requires time, consistency, and the willingness to be seen, fully seen. You discover that the depth available in year 2 is more fulfilling than the intensity in month 2, because the partnership is more meaningful than pursuit. You know, that building a life with someone is more satisfying than constantly falling for new people. Imagine being 1 year into a relationship and still waking up grateful. Not because your partner gives you that high of newness every day, but because you've built something together that matters to you. You know, imagine having a boring Tuesday, no excitement, no intensity, just regular life, and feeling content, not restless, not looking for the next thing, just present with what you've built. You know, and imagine your partner seeing all of you, the parts that aren't exciting, the flaws, the ordinary moments, and staying anyway. And you doing the same for them as well. You know, not because you're forcing it, but because you've discovered that real love lives in those ordinary moments, not in the extraordinary beginnings. Imagine looking back at all the incredible people you almost let go of because, you know, they got boring, or, you know, in month 4, and then realizing that boredom was never about them. It was about your addiction to a feeling that can't last. Imagine feeling grateful that you finally stayed long enough to discover what comes after the boredom. You know, depth, intimacy, partnership, real love. And this is what becomes possible when you just kind of break free from the serial starter pattern. You stop being enslaved to the need for newness. You know, the restlessness that used to drive you towards the next person loses its power. And you can feel it, you know, you feel it, acknowledge it, and choose to stay anyway, because you've learned that what's on the other side of that restlessness is worth more than the temporary high of starting over. You know, you become the person who can actually build lasting relationships, not because you found the perfect person who keeps you constantly excited, but because you've developed the capacity to appreciate what comes after the excitement fades. Let me be clear, this doesn't mean you'll never feel attracted to other people. It doesn't mean you'll never feel the pull towards newness. It doesn't mean relationships will always be easy or exciting. It just means that you'll have the maturity to recognize those feelings for what they actually are. The pull of an old pattern, not a sign that the relationship is wrong. You know, and you'll have the strength to choose depth over intensity, building over falling, staying over starting. Here's what this looks like practically. You're in month 4 with someone new, or with someone. The excitement fades. You know, it started to fade. You feel that familiar restlessness, the voice that, you know, says to you something's missing. But instead of listening to it, instead of ending things, instead of starting to look for someone new, just kind of pause. You ask yourself, all right, so is this actually about them, or is this about my addiction to newness? And you choose to stay, not forever, just long enough to see what's on the other side of that restlessness. And you discover something. The restlessness passes, and what's underneath is something you've never experienced before, a deeper connection, real intimacy, the beginning of actual partnership. You know, and you realize that what you thought was boredom was actually just the absence of intensity, and beneath that absence is something far more valuable, depth. Now, this is the path beyond the serial starter, not a path where you force yourself to stay in relationships that don't work. That's not what we're saying. But a path where you develop the capacity to know whether they work because you've stayed long enough to see what's there when the newness wears off. Yeah, not a path where you settle for boredom, but a path where you discover that what you thought was boredom was actually just that transition from intensity to intimacy. And intimacy is where real love lives, not a path where you give up, excitement, but a path where excitement becomes one ingredient in the relationship. But the only ingredient you're capable of, not the only ingredient you're capable of appreciating. The truth is, the serial starter pattern, it's exhausting for you and for everyone else involved in it. It's exhausting to constantly start over, to always be in the beginning, never experience what's possible in the middle and beyond. Exhausting to break, to break hearts, including your own, to let go of incredible people because they've stopped being new. To wonder why nothing ever lasts, why never recognizing that you're the common denominator. Exhausting to be addicted to a feeling that can't be sustained. You need constant newness to feel alive, to be able to appreciate what's right in front of you because you're always looking for the next thing. But you don't have to stay exhausted. You can choose differently. You can develop the capacity to stay, to build, to appreciate depth, to value consistency, to see the transition from intensity to partnership, not as the end of the relationship, but as the beginning of something deeper. So this week, I'm going to challenge you. I want to challenge you to notice your patterns around beginnings and staying. If you've been hurt by a serial starter, if you notice if you're still attracted to intensity over consistency, if you're still impressed by people who come on strong instead of people who show up steadily, if you're still giving chances to people who can't stay just because they're good at starting and choose differently, require consistency, watch for the follow through, or watch for follow through, I should say. Value depth over intensity. If you recognize the serial starter pattern in yourself, notice the moment the restlessness hits, the moment you start feeling bored, the moment you start thinking about moving on. And instead of running, stay. Sit with that discomfort. Ask yourself, is this actually about the person, or is it about my addiction to newness? And then choose to stay long enough to find out. Not forever, just long enough to see what's on the other side of that urge to leave. And you might discover that what you thought was incompatibility was actually just the end of intensity. And what comes after intensity, if you stay long enough to experience it, is far more fulfilling than another beginning could ever be. And remember, being incredible at beginnings is not the same as being good at relationships. Being able to make someone feel really special for 3 months is not the same as being able to build a life with them. Real love isn't about how intensely you start. It's about whether you can stay when the intensity fades. It's about whether you can build when the falling is over. It's about whether you actually value the person or just the feeling they give you in the beginning. Drake's a master at beginnings. He knows exactly how to make someone feel chosen, special, and seen. He's built an entire career on understanding romance and emotional connection, but he's almost 40 and still alone, still starting and never finishing, still chasing a feeling that can't last. It just can't last. Still letting go of incredible people because they've stopped being new. You don't have to follow that path as well. If you're the serial starter, you can choose depth over intensity, building over falling, staying over starting. That's where real love lives. That's where genuine partnership exists. That's where you finally stop exhausting yourself and everyone around you with endless beginnings that never go nowhere. The power was never in being good at starting. It was always in developing the capacity to actually stay. And that capacity, that maturity, that depth, that ability to appreciate what comes after the beginnings is available to you now. You just have to choose it and keep choosing it. And every time that restlessness hits, every time the newness wears off, every time your pattern tries to repeat itself, choose to stay, choose to build, choose depth. That's where your freedom is. That's where real connection lives. That's where you finally experience the fulfillment that intensity promised but could never deliver. Stop collecting beginnings. Stop starting and stop building. Stop collecting beginnings. Start building something real. That's where your life actually begins. All right. So stay tuned for the next video. And like I always say, guys, stay beautiful, stay connected, and stay conscious in the field.